So the way that life is done is through a lot of things and variations of genomes and stuff like that. In the movie Jurassic Park, they kind of delve into this a lot with dinosaurs and bringing them back to life, bringing back extinct species, in which that way cloning was the main process, right? They weren't, born or hatched or whatever. They were genetically engineered to come from eggs that were already predetermined from DNA they found somewhere else, and like in amber and such things like that, which can be a great thing. But the problem is there's a lot more outlying problems than there are positives. Than the negative outweighs the positive for many ways, right? So the problem is laws of cloning can be beneficial, but it will also cause complications and inevitabilities in the world for the future. Now, granted, I am an anthropologist and biology major, and I'm still learning about this. So, granted, I do know what I'm talking about. That's, but anything can be disproved in the future, basically. And there's the unethical ways it does on animals, and the problems with cloning on humans and or animals, and plus things that people think are the greatest about cloning that can actually be really negatives. So for one, the cloning on animals and the effects it has on them. So the basis is all down to sex cell transversion, in which according to writers at genome.gov, they say reproductive cloning is a very inefficient technique. In most cloned animals, embryos cannot be developed into healthy individuals. Meaning a lot of these animals come out and they look fine, but their intestines and everything are destroyed, so they die really early on, and it's really bad. And some of them have facial features and body features that are deformed, and it's not good. And it only comes to incomplete beings, and all that happens is they result in death. Another problem is through the fact of the ethicality of it. The world of science has a problem with it, and it's kind of like a tug and pull situation. They don't know whether or not it's ethical or whether it is. And Tom Burke, who was a writer at endtimes.com, says the group also said the possible risk of a shortened lifespan and greater susceptibility to cancer or infertile made human cloning unacceptable, regardless whether it became feasible. See, with people, it's a lot harder to do than with animals because we are not made from eggs and things of that nature. So we are it's much more unethical to go with human beings, and shorter lifespans are more susceptible with cancer. It's really not ethical to make a human who has to go through cancer for no reason. And that's the problem with one of the things. Now that I'll talk not about the negative effects of cloning, now I'll talk about it more in depth for animals. The application that occurs on its body, it won't happen with the actual clone, but the children after it, the children after it will have much more problems. In which Natalie Rigoli from connectsfund.org says cloning companies have recently provided some antecedent data concerning the likelihood of an adult animal being able to reproduce. Meaning, the more time it lives, the more infertile it will become, kind of like a donkey. But the problem with the donkey is it's infertile from the beginning. These clones will be fertile, and then later on they'll become infertile and go into its inevitable death, sadly. So that way their genome won't be carried on, and it'll be really just a waste of time rather than anything. So the resources will be really, really spread out and just go away. Another unethical factors for animals are the way it is resurfacing extinct animals. Like the problem with one such species is the woolly mammoth, which they're starting to try to bring back, but they're having problems with it due to it being very hard to find the DNA for it. Green Garage, who is a writer for GreenGarageBlog.org, says we'll be bringing back a species into an environment totally different from the state they once lived in. Basically meaning, like, if we were to bring back the woolly mammoth, where would it stay? It can't stay in the Arctic. Arctic's almost gone, and most of its inhabitants would be very little, and it would just be very cruel to have it in a grassland where it can't survive. So it'd be really just a real problem. Now, one of the other problems one of the things that people try to say is through the fact that it could be a major benefit to the health industry, which yes it can. As Debrais Signe, who writes for NCBI, writes, human cloning promises such great benefits and it would be immoral not to do it. The problem with it is, though, doing it with humans, it can be very dangerous and unethical, and it can even lead to the clones not knowing who they are, and that can be a huge problem in all of itself. Another person named Luis Gale, who writes for Vitani.org, writes, through animal cloning, we could add more protein into the food chain, eliminating some of the pressure that will be undoubtedly be placed on croplands in future generations. Yes, it could add to more food, but the problem is that food could be tainted due to it being a genetic clone of something else. You don't like the health risks, like I've talked about earlier. Those will go into effect right there, and that can be really bad for for humans to ingest. Now, finally, in the end, talked about the unethical ways of cloning on humans, animals, and the effects of it, right? And I addressed, some of the things that people thought are good, but are really just bad. Now, the problem, the laws of nature and the laws of cloning are beneficial, but for right now, it only causes complications and errors for the world. And the case for genetics or cloning, it is very unequipped to perform even bringing back extinct species, so therefore it probably will never be a problem. And with the recent studies and projects that'll go with cloning, hopefully playing God does not give a negative outcome.